the news tonight, His Majesty says in a speech delivered on his behalf at an Islamic summit in Istanbul that the war on terrorism is the war of Muslims to defend their religion and future. The UN envoy for Syria says there is little improvement in aid deliveries to besieged areas in the country. And the Russian president says the Syrian people must sit down for political talks and adopt a new constitution for country. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King said the Muslim Ummah or nation is facing challenges that threaten its religion and destiny. In a speech delivered on his behalf at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Summit, which opened in Istanbul, the King said terrorism and extremism that seeks to distort the image of Islam and Muslims is the danger that we all should stand against. The King stressed that the war on terrorism and the Khawarij, the outlaws of the age, is our war, the war of Muslims, the war to defend our religion and future. It is either to face this impending danger alone or take the fight decision of collective joint work to defeat the forces of evil and terrorism, the King urged. The terrorism that threatens many of our countries, the King said, recognizes no boundaries or nationality and aims to tarnish the image of Islam and its message of tolerance. In Seoul led Jordan's delegation, the 13th summit of the Pan-Islamic Organization held under the theme Unity and Solidarity for Justice and Peace. Terrorism and a host of regional issues, including the Palestinian cause, will figure high on the agenda of the two-day meeting, as well as ways and means to develop joint Islamic work and promote OIC's role in the region and the world. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan opened the summit and called on Islamic and Western countries to unite efforts in fighting militant organizations. He said the world should agree on a unanimous approach in defending extremist entities. The leaders of the Islamic world are liaising on the regional issues with the latest developments in Palestine, Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Nagorno-Karabakh, among others, at their summit. In an address, Turkish Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu urged leaders of the Islamic world to gear up support for the Palestinian cause. Davutoglu held bilateral talks with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and other leaders on the sidelines of the summit. The UN envoy for Syria said he is frustrated that there is little improvement in aid deliveries to besieged areas. Stefan de Mistura said on the second day of a new round of Syria peace talks in Geneva that his statement is a wake-up call that has to be heeded. The United Nations, which is mediating the peace talks, has been calling for improvement in the humanitarian situation across. But with a cessation of hostilities agreement increasingly shaky, aid access is beginning to drop off. De Mistura spoke to reporters after meeting envoys from countries which form part of the humanitarian task force.
I cannot deny that everyone in the meeting was disappointed. Indeed, many of them actually frustrated by the lack of new convoys reaching, in particular, some areas which, as you know, have been identified as besieged and identified by also the various international documents. We have not been able, we have not been able to reach so far Duma, Daraya, East Arasta, and we need to do more to Madamia, Zabadani, Kefraya, and Fua.
In a sign of progress in the Geneva talks, Syria's main opposition group said it is willing to share membership of a transitional governing body with current members of the government of President Bashar al-Assad, but not with Assad himself.
A transitional governing body that consists of people who are with the regime now, and half of them, half of this body is from the regime side, and the other half is from the opposition side. Their responsibility is to call for a big national conference in Syria. National conference will form a committee that really takes care of forming a new constitution there for the country, and also call for parliament election.
In the backdrop of the Syrian peace talks, the Syrian military continued airstrikes on the rebel-held areas around Talbisa in the Homs province. Locals reported a number of people wounded and were shown carried to a field hospital in Talbisa. The upsurge in fighting in Homs and Aleppo provinces has further threatened the already widely violated cessation of hostilities agreement brokered by Russia and the United States. The escalation of violence could lead to the collapse of the Geneva peace talks. Hundreds of Syrian refugees cross into Jordan daily as the kingdom keeps its border open to people displaced by the Syrian civil war. A Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army statement said 298 refugees of various age groups had made it into the frontier over the last 24 hours. It said border guards escorted the newcomers, provided them with the necessary aid and transported them to shelters and refugee camps. The statement said Royal Medical Services personnel attended to the sick refugees. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the Syrian people must sit down for political talks and adopt a new constitution for their country. In his annual televised phone-in, he also said terrorism remains a global threat and Russia knows it firsthand. He said Russia was doing everything to ensure the situation in Syria did not deteriorate. Speaking at the Syrian army, backed by Russian airstrikes, launched a new offensive in Aleppo, Putin called on warring party to lay down arms and launch political process.
We left the Syrian army in a position where, with the support of part of the contingent that was left there, it can carry out serious offensive operations. Already, after our withdrawal, it has taken Palmyra. It has taken some other important strategic settlements. We really hope that the non-use of arms by both sides, which are supported by various parties, including our support, will lead to peaceful resolution, but it is necessary to come to an agreement, sit down for political talks, and adopt a new constitution, and to hold early elections based on this constitution, and through this come out of the crisis.
Iraqi lawmakers voted to remove the parliament speaker and his deputies amid a major row over the cabinet lineup that has caused chaos in the legislature. The move would further delay efforts to select a new cabinet and worsen political turmoil in Iraq. It comes at a time when the country is battling terrorist groups and struggling with a major financial crisis. Parliament Speaker Salim Al-Jbouri, one of the country's main Sunni Arab politicians, issued a statement saying that the session, which he did not attend, was unconstitutional. He also said the required quorum of 165 was not reached. The statement said the session was held in the absence of the Speaker of Parliament, is unconstitutional and lacked the necessary quorum. Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian in the occupied West Bank. The occupation army said the man attacked soldiers with an axe at the refugee camp near the West Bank city of Hebron, slightly wounding one of them. But the claim was disputed by Palestinians who said he was shot after he got off from a bus. Elsewhere, Israeli military forces sparked a fire that gutted about 10 Palestinian shops in the occupied West Bank. The soldiers tried to blow open safes in a raid on a money-changing office, which the army suspects of handling funds for militants. The fire brigade in the town of El Bira said no one was hurt in the blaze that spread through a 3-story commercial building in the town before opening hours. An Israeli military spokeswoman said the fire started after troops attempted to open safes using a controlled explosion. Here at home, the Legal Muslim Brotherhood Society said it rejected attempts to foment strife and undermine national unity. In a statement issued after authorities sealed the headquarters of the illegal Muslim Brotherhood in Amman, the licensed Brotherhood dismissed any link between yesterday's closure and events outside the country. Such a link, it said, is an attempt to shuffle cards and delude minds, and it's a call for escalation. It called on the unlicensed group for reason to preserve the Brotherhood's spirit and ideology by adhering to the country's laws that regulate such groups. The statement said it regretted yesterday's closure of the illegal Brotherhood's headquarters that came after the group's leadership refused to heed the government's repeated requests to adhere with the laws governing such groups. The statement said the unlicensed Brotherhood had reneged on a government order not to hold elections of its Shura Council and Politburo since it was not registered. World Bank President Jim Yong Kim sounded a grim note on the world economy with war in Syria and the influx of refugees. He also cited drops in the prices of oil as a threatening global economic stability. Kim spoke at the opening news conference of the International Monetary Fund IMF G20 spring meetings in Washington, D.C. He said low oil prices will make it more difficult for Syria to rebuild from its civil war because the normal donor nations in the Middle East could struggle to provide support.
Estimates for the cost of rebuilding Syria that reaches $150, $180 billion just to get them back to the levels that they were before the war. And what you mentioned is very important, that the low price of oil has really now had an impact. I mean, we're following the oil-producing countries in the region very closely, and what we learn is that while the cost of production of oil may be low, what's worrisome is the cost of the price of oil that these governments need to reach fiscal balance. In other words, what price of oil do they need to not go into fiscal deficit?
They are famously sporty and competitive couple. Prince William and Kate Middleton, Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, visited the tiny Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. They met its young royal couple for the first time and tried their hands at a national dart throwing sport. William and Kate wielded a bow and arrow and attempted the traditional game of huro, in which players throw large darts at a target about 10 meters away. But even after being allowed to stand slightly closer to the target, their arrows went nowhere near.
I don't think they really know what's going on. I think that's the problem. Yeah, I think the problem is the couple.
World number 2, Andy Murray fought back from a set and double break down to beat Benoit Piguet and reach the Monte Carlo Masters quarterfinals. The Scot eventually won 2-6, 7-5, 7-5 in 2 hours and 33 minutes against the 26-year-old Frenchman. Murray will face the 10th seeded Canadian Milos Raonic. And an emotional Kobe Bryant said goodbye to his 20-year career before a sellout crowd of nearly 19,000 at his home, the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Bryant played his 1,566th game as the Lakers hosted the Utah Jazz, scoring 60 points in 42 minutes. Moments before starting the final game of his stellar 20-year career in the NBA, Kobe Bryant was described as the greatest ever to wear the purple and gold by fellow Los Angeles Lakers great Magic Johnson. Home favorite Rashid Al-Murabiti came out on top of the exhausting 84-kilometer second part of the 4th stage of the epic marathon the Sabal in Morocco. Al-Murabiti, who leads the men's race overall, battled through the longest stage of the race alongside compatriot Abdelkader El-Muazzez and Spaniard Jose Martinez. And finally, the weather forecast: most settled conditions in many areas across the kingdom. So it will remain relatively cold tonight, but warmer in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea, though with some fog over the highlands. Mild spring conditions in most areas are forecast for tomorrow, when temperatures will rise further, with plenty of sunshine and northwesterly moderate winds picking up at times. Temperatures will be around average at this time of year, with a high of 28 degrees in the Dead Sea. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a hot day tomorrow, with a high of 29 degrees, northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close here our top stories once again, His Majesty says in a speech delivered on his behalf at an Islamic summit in Istanbul that the war on terrorism is the war of Muslims to defend their religion and future. The UN envoy for Syria says there is little improvement in aid deliveries to besieged areas in the country. The Russian president says the Syrian people must sit down for political talks and adopt a new constitution for country. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Lawal Balkar. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.